Hello, welcome back. So, today I'm going to be doing the anti-TBR tag. So, if you've been around my channel, you might have noticed that I don't really do TBR videos. I mean, I do most anticipated books, which is the books that I'm most looking forward to reading that year, and most recently I did a books I want to reread video, but I don't really do like October TBR or like whatever kind of TBR. And the reason for that is that my TBR is basically one big list, and I just go in the order of that list, and I don't usually read enough in a month to do a whole video about it. And also, I feel like a lot of booktubers are like mood readers, so while they might say, they might have all these books on their TBR, they probably won't get to all of them, and they'll pick up other books. Well, whereas I usually stick to the order of the list. Sometimes I have to rearrange things. So yeah, so there wouldn't be any surprise. So, since I don't really do TBR videos, I thought it would be fitting that I do the anti-TBR tag so that you know what not to expect. And of course, like the regular disclaimers said, like people have to give, this isn't to hate on anyone who does like these books, but I'm just telling you, I'm not interested in these. So let's get into it. So the first question is a popular book everyone loves that you have no interest in reading. So I have a few different answers for this. So the first thing that came to mind for this question is actually a series, and there is a later question about a series, but I've come up with a different answer for that. And it's not that I've heard anything bad about this series, it's just, as the question says, no interest in reading it. And that series would be the Hunger Games series by Suzanne Collins. I know. Um, it's just, I've never been interested in this series. I think when I was younger and first started getting into reading, I didn't want to read books where people died, and obviously in the Hunger Games, lots of people died, so there's that. But then in grade 8 is when I read The Giver by Lois Lowry, and then all of a sudden I was interested in dystopian books. But I think even when I found out Hunger Games was dystopian, I still wasn't interested in reading it because I guess that kind of dystopian world didn't sound interesting to me. But then now, as I'm older, like the thing about like people dying in books like isn't that bothered to me, because now I actually kind of want a book that will make me cry, because I feel like I don't really cry in books. But even then, I am still not interested in this series. And honestly, I think the fact that everyone likes this series is actually deterring me from wanting to read it. So, yes, so there's one thing. But then I thought, okay, well, this question, since there is a later question about the series, they're probably thinking of some standalones I'm not interested in reading. So I'm sort of thinking, okay, what standalones? And am I not really interested in reading? And I did come up with 2 books. Now these books are really only known, I'd say, in the Christian booktube space. However, there is a lot of hype for these books in among Christian booktube, and I don't really want to read these books. And those books are The Extraordinary Deaths of Mrs. Kipp by Sarah Brunswald and A Lady's Guide to Marvels and Misadventure by Angela Bell. So for A Lady's Guide, the only thing about this book that made me vaguely interested in it was a review from someone who didn't even like it. Well, I guess one of the few who didn't like it. So like everything that I've heard, well, I mean, I guess I haven't seen that many reviews of that, but everything I've heard about this book from the people who have liked it is like none of it has been a selling point. Like, for one, I guess in general, like the plot doesn't sound interesting to me, and like people describe it as whimsical, and that's not interesting to me. And I mean, it's historical fiction, which I mean, that's not. I mean, I have enjoyed some historical fiction, but the historical fiction I'm more into is like hard hitting stuff, whereas this seems more like fun historical fiction I get. So there's that. And then with Mrs. Kip, actually, how I keep seeing this one um, is for on Goodreads where it's like you have this book and then oh people who like this book also like these books. So I keep seeing it in like this for like books that I like, and just every time I see it I'm like, no, I refuse. I don't want to read that. But since people who liked some of the books I liked also like this book, maybe if I were to read it I would actually like it, but I don't want to. Okay, so moving on. Question 2 is a classic book or author you don't have an interest in reading. So this is interesting. So I'm gonna kind of divide classics like this because this is how it makes sense. Sorry, it makes sense in my brain. So 1800s classics in general, I'm kind of more wary of. I think after reading Emma by Jane Austen, now when I no, and I look at classics, I'm like, okay, am I just gonna not understand what's happening like with that book? But I don't want to completely write off those kinds of books, and some of those kinds of books I am interested in. But because I'm more generally wary of 1800s cl- classics, classics from the 20th century, I'm automatically more interested in. But one book from that era that I'm not really interested in is The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. So, how I've seen this one is, I think I mentioned in the last tag I did that like I do tend to like the kind of books that we have to read for school, and so um, naturally I'd want to find more that wasn't just what was assigned to my school, and that this book keeps coming up in those kinds of lists. But every time I see it, I'm like, not really interested in it. But at the same time, I don't really know anything about it. So if you've read that book, curious to I'd be curious what you thought of it. So yeah. Alright, this question's where it gets a little dicey. A problematic author whose books you have no interest in reading. Yeah. So originally I was gonna say Colleen Hoover, but I had 3 of her books on my TBR at one point, so I feel like that doesn't really count. But I did come up with a different author. And I think with this author, it's more of the case of she had one problematic book and now people deem her a problematic author, and that would be Tilly Cole. So the book I'd say she's most known for is A Thousand Boy Kisses. It's one of the popular book talk sad books, and I had a fascination with those types of books at one point. But even at that time, and I would see this book around, and even then, back then, I was like, I'm probably not going to read that. Because of that, I willingly exposed myself to the spoilers. So, yeah, but then how I found out that Tilly Cole is problematic was so one of the booktubers I had saw, and she in one of her videos she gave The Thousand Boy Kisses 5 stars, but then when she did a video talking about the 5 stars of that year, I noticed that A Thousand Boy Kisses was not included. So I commented being like, hey, where's A Thousand Boy Kisses? I remember you gave that one 5 stars. And so she responded, and first of all, she was impressed that I remembered that, which it's really not that impressive. It's just that I rewatch videos a lot, so by the time I'd watch that video, I had probably seen her reading sad books for 24 hours video like at least 10 times. Yeah, and so what she said was that apparently Tilly Cole came out with like a KKK romance or something, and so don't support that, so I didn't want to include that book. And then I've also heard some other people say that. So I mean that sounds bad, but I mean I haven't looked into that. I haven't looked into this story for myself, so maybe it's not what it seems. But even so, I'm not really interested in reading her books. So there you go. Question 4 is an author you have read a couple of books from and have decided that their books are not for you. So at first I wasn't sure what to say for this one, and I even had to look through all the books I've read over the past few years to try to see, and I wasn't sure. But then it hit me. Victoria Lynn. I am kind of sad about this one because I like the idea of supporting Victoria Lynn because it seems her values align with mine. But the two books that I have read from her, I haven't liked. Now, to be fair, the two books I have read from her are her debut book and her least popular book. So maybe her other books are better, but at the same time, her other books don't sound interesting to me. So yeah, I think it's safe to say this author is not for me. So, question 5. A genre you have no interest in, or a genre you tried to get into and couldn't. So, one genre that I know I had a hard time getting into when I was in my I need to be drawn in to really like it phase was fantasy. I was reading fantasies, and then eventually, after I was reading fantasies and not really being drawn in, I was like, okay, I should probably just stop with fantasy. It's clearly not my genre. But that was in my I need to be drawn in to really like it phase. So, but recently, now that I'm out of it, I did read a fantasy book, and is it a genre I still can't get into? Well, you'll have to wait for my upcoming recent reads to find out. So, question 6. A book you have bought but will never read. This can be a book you have unhauled / returned to the library unread. So let's talk about Colleen Hoover now. I was trying to avoid talking about this book, but I have no choice. So yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I had 3 of her books on my TBR at one point, and the first one I planned on reading was Reminders of Him. So, and I wanted to start with this one because from what I heard, it seemed like her best out of all her books. This one has the highest average rating on Goodreads, and I had heard basically nothing good but good things about it. Yeah. Um, and I wasn't planning on getting a physical copy of it, but I saw it in the store one day, and I was like, oh, yeah, I'm planning on reading this book. And so I read like a part of the first little bit, and I didn't like it enough to want to get it right then. But then after I didn't get it, it drove me crazy that I hadn't get it. So I did eventually get it. But then I started hearing things. Like the first thing I heard was that Colleen Hoover books are spicy. So then it's like, whoa, uh-oh. Um, but then I was like, oh, well, I've heard that not all Colleen Hoover books are spicy, so maybe this one is one of those, but no, this one is spicy. Um, and so I was like, okay, well, maybe I could just skip those chapters. But then, I don't know, then I just got the general negative sense, negative talk around her. Um, so then I was like, well, I don't even want to be seen reading a Coho book. And so I got rid of that book. So, and I feel like even if I do feel so inclined to pick up a Colleen Hoover book, it probably won't be this one. So, yeah. Question 7. A series you have no interest in reading, or a series you started and have DNF'd. So, I already talked about in the beginning a series that I have no interest in, so I'm going to talk about a series that I've DNF'd. And that is the On the Runway series by Melody Carlson. So the first book, Premiere, wasn't bad. In fact, it was kind of nostalgic in a way because I read a lot of Melody Carlson books in high school, and this first book like reminded me of those, so it was kind of fun. But I did give it 2.75 stars because I wasn't drawn in, but I still thought it was fun. And even not being drawn in, like I still wanted to continue the series. So I read the second book, Catwalk, and I did not like it. I think the main thing that annoyed me about Catwalk is that it felt like Melody Carlson was trying to shoehorn in too much of the Carter House girls. Like, I feel like I would have liked it better had there had just been one Carter House girl in this book, and then maybe some others introduced throughout the rest of the series. And I say that because when Taylor was first mentioned in the book, I was like, oh, I was like kind of excited. But then with every Carter House girl that was mentioned after that, I got more and more annoyed. So that was bad enough. But then towards the end of the book, Melody threw in one of my least favorite tropes. Now, obviously, I can't say what that trope is without giving spoilers. So there's that. And because of that, I was prepared to give this book 1.5 or maybe even a 1 star, but thankfully the ending saved it from that fate. But I did end up giving this book a personal rating of 2 stars. So because of that, I don't plan to continue on with this series. It's, I believe, a 5-book series. Um, but yeah, I don't want to because I did not like Catwalk. So moving on. All right, last question is a new release you have no interest in reading. And the simple answer that I've come up with for this one is most new releases don't interest me. So, all right, that is the end of the tag. Um, yeah, I guess I'll put down the questions for this tag in the description. If you want to do it yourself. Although I think this tag was first a big thing like 4 years ago, so I don't know if anyone else wanted to do this tag. So, but if you're not gonna do this tag, if you're just a regular viewer, I would be curious. Put down in the comments you like any books you're not interested in, or if you want to answer any of the questions. So feel free to do that. So that is all. Goodbye.